What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today we're talking about 15 potential head coaching candidates in next year's head coaching carousel. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button and help me and my channel out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more football content, hit that subscribe button and help us get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. And comment some names that you're intrigued by down below in the comment section. Who do you think I left off the list? Who are these names on this list are you most intrigued by? I responded to just about every comment, so let's talk about these potential head coaching candidates down below. So before we jump into it, there was one slide I did not put on here that I did in last year's video, which, by the way, 4 of my 6 duh candidates ended up becoming head coaches. One of my maybes, with a couple of the other maybes like Kellen Moore and Byron Leftwich getting interviews, and one of my sleeper picks, and Kevin O'Connell is now a head coach. So didn't do too bad last year. I'm hoping to have some similar success this year, but the one slide I did not include this year I did last year was the college guys. But let me just get that off the top. Like Jim Harbaugh could totally be in the mix, Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell, any of those guys. Maybe after 1 year, Lincoln Riley doesn't feel plausible, but maybe Brian Kelly after 1 year at LSU. Plenty of college guys who can take that leap forward, but I think Urban Meyer is probably scared away teams just a little bit from doing that once again. But, I could totally see, a Matt Campbell or, Jim Harbaugh being a name that is potentially getting interviews next coaching carousel. So we'll start with the obvious names. This is kind of the boring part of the video because, let's start with Sean Payton. Sean Payton's going to be an NFL head coach. He's going to be hired sometime next offseason. And to me, there's not a whole lot of jobs I think can open up. Maybe Mike McCarthy in Dallas, and that kind of leads me. I think Sean Payton, that's, if you saw my NFC East way too early season predictions, I like the Eagles to win the NFC East, and I have Dallas just outside the wild card. If they don't make the playoffs, Sean Payton is going to become the head coach, and Mike McCarthy's out. I know it's pretty obvious, it's simple, we've heard 1,000 times, but sometimes the most obvious answer is the correct one, and I think Sean Payton wants to be the Cowboys head coach, and I think Mike McCarthy might be outpositioned here by Sean Payton by taking a year off, go work for Fox, and just kind of waiting in the wing. So especially if they don't make the playoffs, I totally think that swap happens. And even if they make us a wild card, I can see Jerry Jones still being kind of pissed about that and not fully hitting those expectations. But even if it's not Dallas, other teams that could be higher, maybe Washington if they want to move on from Ron Rivera. We'll talk about the Commanders a little later on, and a coordinator I'm intrigued by on that staff. Extensions to Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray make that probably not plausible. Pete Carroll could totally retire. Matt Rule is probably on the hottest seat of anybody in the league. So there's going to be some openings, but I don't know if there's necessarily as many head coaching jobs coming open that we saw this past offseason. But Sean Payton's going to become a head coach. He's going to be back in the biz within a year, and I think it's going to be with Dallas if I had to pick right now. But there's plenty of other teams that are intrigued by a guy who had a ton of success as an offensive play caller and worked under Bill Parcells, had a ton of success with Drew Brees. He's going to be top of the list for plenty of people. So won't need to talk long about that. He's going to have a job right around this time next year. So Eric Bieniemy, Chiefs offensive coordinator. I'm going to continue to put him in the obvious names because it should be obvious, right? This guy has helped engineer, been a part of, and called plays for maybe the most explosive offense over the past 4 years. If you want to take it that big of a sample size, Bieniemy has had a ton of success. Nothing but praise coming out of that Chiefs locker room and from the players. So it's still kind of bewildering. Maybe he's not a great interviewee. I don't know. Not in that space, so I can't speak to that. But hey, if you're an offensive coordinator for an offense anywhere near as good as Kansas City, you're probably already a head coach right now. So we'll kind of leave it at that. Kellen Moore, he was on my baby list last year, got some interviews, got some intrigue from Miami. Now I think he's on the obvious names list. I think if I'm a big Kellen Moore fan, especially the first 6 to 8 weeks last year. I thought that scheme was really creative and unique, and I really dug what they were drawing and putting together and putting on the field. Does need more success, kind of had some bumps in the road middle and late in the season. Some of that coincides with Dak Prescott's injury. But that being said, young, former quarterback, offensive play caller with plenty of gaudy numbers to back it up. Just when you look at, points per game, yards per game, and even Pro Football Focus, top 5, and EPA per play, which, if you're an analytics guy, that's a huge feather in your cap. So I think Kellen Moore has definitely put himself in a position to be a future head coach, and the next, maybe next big offensive guru, next young guy that's going to change the system and, change the way we look at offense or whatever. But big time Kellen Moore fan, so I think he's definitely top of the list for a lot of teams. Byron Leftwich, he was another guy that was on the maybe list that got some interviews. I definitely thought he had that Jags job. I guess they didn't want to move on from Trent Baalke, bring in Adrian Wilson. Feels like a little bit of a mistake there, but Doug Peterson's a good coach, so we'll see. But Byron Leftwich, former NFL quarterback. He's worked with Tom Brady. And also, I think part of this is to want to become a head coach, it's both an opportunity has to open up and you have to want to leave. And maybe that's part of why, Eric Bieniemy hasn't moved on. And, maybe Kellen Moore is hesitant, especially if Sean Payton does come in. Maybe he's intrigued with working, and maybe he thinks that further improves his stock. Maybe. But I think, if Brady retires this year, Byron Leftwich's going to be looking for a head coaching job. There's no clear line of succession after Brady. Like, I don't know if Byron Leftwich is, chomping at the bit to work with Kyle Trask day in and day out. So I think, strong showing from that offense. The scheme's unique. If it's efficient, this team's going to be in the playoffs, probably making a deep postseason run. He'll have plenty of love. And I think he'll be looking for a head coaching job, trying to get away from Tampa Bay and, move on from having to work with a Kyle Trask or whoever ends up being the Tom Brady successor. So I think he'll be looking, and I think there'll be some jobs that are looking at him. Then Brian Flores, Steelers linebacker coach, obviously former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, double-digit wins a couple years back, and kind of both years as the head coach kind of exceeded expectations. Great defensive coach and just a great leader and presence in the locker room. So I think, it won't take long before he finds a head coaching job. Now, again, I don't know how many jobs are fully going to be open next offseason, so maybe it's another year waiting. Maybe he takes a DC job in the meantime. We'll see. Also, part of the hesitation, maybe hiring Flores is, we'll see where this lawsuit goes. So there could be some complications there, but when it comes to being a head coach, he's been a very good one before. So if you've already done it at a high level of success, that is something that teams are going to that's going to be the difference in a 50-50 situation of this guy we like, never been a head coach though, versus a guy we like and been a head coach. That could be the difference maker, and maybe even open up a door for Flores next offseason. Now let's talk about some of these maybe guys. Dan Quinn probably, let me make this clear. I wanted to put Dan Quinn on the obvious because he does kind of feel obvious. At the beginning of this year's coaching carousel, it felt like every job was available to him, and like if he wanted it, there was an offer waiting to be accepted. Whether it was Chicago, Denver, whatever the case may be, felt like there were plenty of chances for him there. Just decides to go back to Dallas, which is so interesting. Maybe part of the reason he's on the maybe list, no pun intended there, but maybe if this team hires Sean Payton, he's like the head coach and play caller, and they keep Dan Quinn as the DC, that's a really intriguing coaching staff. That's a really talented coaching staff. So that could be a pairing that maybe Sean Payton's like, hey, Dan, don't take a job. You and me can do this, and we can take this team to new heights or whatever. That's kind of fascinating to think about. But that being said, he's been a head coach before. Turned around that Cowboys defense. And another reason I kind of have him on the maybe list is I'm anticipating some regression from that Cowboys defense. You lose Randy Gregory. That's a big presence on the edge. And, Trevon Diggs probably is not going to come down with 11 interceptions. I think he can improve as a coverage player, but probably not going to come down with that many turnovers. Still questioning what's going on in the safety spot. Can the linebackers stay healthy? There's definitely some question marks across that defense. So if that Cowboys defense takes a step back, maybe there's not as many jobs at the disposal of Dan Quinn. But that being said, if this team's anywhere close to where it was last year, or maybe even better, given the resources that are now out of the door and out of the building, then Dan Quinn might be the number one head coaching candidate right behind Sean Payton. Like, I could totally see that. So a little bit of variance of how this could shake out for Dan Quinn. But like I said, he's led a team to a Super Bowl before. He's been a head coach, done wonders with that Cowboys defense. There's going to be a lot of teams that are interested. Ken Dorsey, Bills offensive coordinator, and we just saw the Bills OC get a head coaching job, Brian Dable, so it only makes sense that the successor and former Bills QB coach, Ken Dorsey, who a lot of people give the credit for Josh Allen's progression and growth at the NFL level to Ken Dorsey and not Brian Dable, which is really interesting. So this year we'll do a ton. I think 1 year as an OC might be all that Ken Dorsey needs, right? What I'm really fascinated to see is Sean McDermott has talked about wanting to run the ball more, and there's been some public, butting of heads between Dable and McDermott about how often they should run. Dable's I'm going to throw the ball. The team led the league in throws on early downs, so that was a big part of his MO. And McDermott wanted a little bit of a change there. Does Dorsey kind of bow down to that, or does he kind of stick with that Dable way of thinking? Can't wait to see what that answer is. And then Pep Hamilton, Texans OC, is also the former offensive coordinator for the Colts when they had Andrew Luck. Plenty of success there. So now that he's kind of taken over for Tim Kelly, who I didn't think was that bad as a play caller last year for Houston, kind of did more than I would have anticipated with how little he had at his disposal. But Pep Hamilton definitely an upgrade, and he was the QB coach there last year. So Davis Mills, Pep Hamilton, these two are going to be kind of tied together this season. If Mills exceeds expectations like he did last year, Pep Hamilton will certainly have a strong case to become a head coaching candidate. If he kind of falls by the wayside, though, Pep Hamilton kind of has that built-in insurance. Well, yeah, it's a third-round quarterback. We were just kind of throwing it at the wind and seeing if it's stuck, throwing it at the wall and seeing if it's stuck. But if not, we were in a rebuild. We were looking at, the quarterback class anyway. So he's kind of got a built-in excuse while also having a really awesome, ability to take Davis Mills' success and pat himself on the back with that. So really intriguing situation for Pep Hamilton. But again, he worked with Andrew Luck. So I can see a team being especially if they're picking, let's say Pete Carroll retires and the Seahawks pick in the top 5. I could totally see Seattle being like, we need that guy who's worked with young quarterbacks before. Hamilton did it with Luck. He's done it with Mills. Let's hire, and he'll work with Bryce Young, or we'll work with C.J. Stroud, Tyler Mann, whoever it ends up being. So definitely think there's some situations where Pep Hamilton will be towards team's top of the list. Jonathan Gannon, and there was a quote, I can't remember exactly who reported it, which kills me, but talking about he anticipates his defense taking a step forward and becoming a little more unique. Because last year was a lot of soft zone, keep the ball in front of you, limit big plays, which is totally fine. And I mean, especially this day and age, like that's what gave the Chiefs headaches, and it became the talking point throughout the middle of the season. Like, this is too high coverage. How do you take away big plays? How can you force offenses to kind of shift and play underneath and create 10-play drives? And kind of Jonathan Gannon was one of those defensive minds that was like, hey, you know what? If you put together a 10, 12-play drive and get in the end zone, cool, you've earned it. But I'm not going to let you get behind me for 75 yards. So that safe defense was already one that was interesting. He had an interview with the Texans last year, which their head coaching search was just interesting in and of itself. But now if he thinks that defense can take a step forward, that's kind of an interesting parallel where it's like, hey, I understand the talent that's on my team, so I know what I need to do as a defensive coordinator to maximize and also maximize what is there and then limit the potential weaknesses of that. But now that we have a little more defensive talent, we add James Bradbury. We've put in more resources across the defensive line. Hassan Reddick, draft Jordan Davis. We got a linebacker in Nakobe Dean. Now I can do more with that. So we'll see if it really comes to fruition and it looks good and the production follows suit. But if that defense does take a step forward, I mean, this could be a Brandon Staley type of rise for Jonathan Gannon. Another DC that could totally do the same thing, D'Amico Ryans. And I think the feather in the cap of Ryans, to continue to use that saying, just like one of the guys we'll talk about in the sleeper category, who I've always been high on, and he's going into second year as a DC. These guys who have been former players and just hold that unbelievable presence at the front of a room. Like, whenever you hear D'Amico Ryans speak, you listen, whether you're just scrolling on Twitter or you just see something pop up on whatever the case may be, however you're digesting that soundbite, D'Amico Ryans talks, you listen. And you got to feel like it's the same thing inside that locker room. So maybe you look at that 49ers defense and, okay, well, Ryans is kind of doing more of the same from Robert Saleh. He's not really doing anything revolutionary. That's fine. If he's that defensive coordinator that just kind of understands the strengths of that scheme and its philosophies and make minor tweaks and adapt a little bit as we go along, but for the most part continues to utilize what's been a very efficient style of defense, but then also brings that leadership component, that is really interesting. And a guy who had an interview with the Vikings this past offseason, I could totally see him getting more interviews next coaching carousel. Now let's get into my dark horse. This is why I make this video. I love this part of it. And last year the top name I had was Kevin O'Connell. Maybe he shouldn't have been a dark horse, but not a name that I heard a lot of people talking about, and now he's a head coach, so that's pretty cool. Aaron Glenn is the guy I was talking about with D'Amico Ryans, that similar ability, former player, big-time presence. Like, he speaks, you listen, and really, he's done a pretty good job last year with that Lions defense. I mean, they weren't all world, but they had a better point differential than the Atlanta Falcons, despite the record being so different. I think this year it only gets better, right? You add Aiden Hutchinson, you add a Josh Pascal. You're hoping Jeff Okudah can stay healthy, right? And if he does, then him, Amani Oruwariye, year 2 Fetu Melifonwu. There's some talent there in the secondary, and he's also the guy who was a DB coach in New Orleans, worked with Marshall Lattimore, Marcus Williams, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. A lot of really good football players there. So when he actually had a head coaching interview with the Saints after Sean Payton decided to retire, but that's also just because of the familiarity between those two sides, I think this could be the year where he gets a little bit more than that. Again, former player, I just love his ability to be a potential leader in a locker room. Plus, I think he's done a good job with a defense that you don't look at and you're not overly impressed by, right? So he's had some success, and we'll see only 1 year sample, we'll see what it looks like in year 2, but plus that former player, aspect to it, he understands, he can relate, and he has that leadership ability. I'm really intrigued by Aaron Glenn potentially being a head coaching candidate next year. Mike Kafka, I won't talk on this one. This is, he's a dark horse, but he's a pretty well-known, offensive coordinator, so I don't know if he's truly a dark horse here, but former QB coach in Kansas City, and anytime he worked with Patrick Mahomes, there was, people used to say if you had lunch with Sean McVay, you got a head coaching job. Now it's kind of becoming that with Kansas City, right? Like, if you breathe the same air as Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, then you're going to get a head coaching interview at least. So Mike Kafka could totally be the next guy. He's also a former quarterback in the league, so that's always really alluring. And kind of what we talked about with Pep Hamilton, I could see a team with a young quarterback, maybe one they just drafted, saying, hey, this is a guy, or obviously they're going to make this hire first, but if you're anticipating going quarterback in the draft or something similar to those situations, I could see a team being like, Mike Kafka has had success. He's worked with plenty of different quarterbacks. He's the guy to try to mentor our future franchise quarterback. So I think Mike Kafka, within this year or the next, he's probably going to become a head coach. And then Scott Turner, an offensive coordinator that not a lot of people talk about, but utilizes motion and play action a ton, and that's all stuff that is great to me. I think that's just taking advantage of the numbers in front of you. And really, you look at what he did last year, like, considering Taylor Heineke was the starting quarterback, like, this team really didn't have as the business, leading the Chiefs at halftime in their game, winning some of the games that they did. I'm a big Scott Turner fan. And just kind of a creative mind, also the son of a former NFL head coach in Norv Turner, and sometimes those bloodlines play a big impact. But I could see a team that is looking for a spark on offense, something different, kind of like, Minnesota. It's like, hey, the offense has gotten a little stagnant. It's not necessarily what we want it to be. It's not fully taking advantage of the talent on that side. Let's bring in a Kevin O'Connell. I can see something similar shaking out for Scott Turner, where it's like, we just need more play action. We need more motion. We need something different. We need something that fits modern NFL standards. And Scott Turner could totally be that guy. And I think he's done a lot with a little, considering, again, Taylor Heineke is QB last year. Carson Wentz, more talented. The floor is probably about the same as Taylor Heineke, but the upside is definitely a lot higher. Plus, another year working with De'Ami Brown. Terry McLaurin just got paid. So there's just so much that's really interesting there. And I think Scott Turner, if that offense exceeds expectations, is going to get some interviews. And Joe Brady, this is, not necessarily a dark horse. He was actually on my dud list last year. That one was kind of a miss. But, that situation in Carolina just, I don't know, it didn't seem prudent. Like, Matt Rule fires him because he wants to run the ball more. Like, dude, it's 2022. Let's wake up. That point aside, that's just my personal bias coming through. Ton of success at LSU, and now he's going to have the chance to be the QB coach in Buffalo for an offense that might lead the league in total yards, points per game, plenty of other offensive stats. Joe Brady's going to have gaudy numbers to kind of pat his resume with after this year. And, oh, look, Josh Allen was great, another an elite season. I worked with him day in and day out. I'm also that guy I worked with Joe Burrow at LSU. Let me be that guy who works with your young quarterback in the future. Totally could see that. Now, the jump from QB coach to head coach is kind of unlikely, and that's why I have him in the dark horse category. Last year, he was an OC. Now he's a QB coach, so probably going to take the next step of being an offensive coordinator and then becoming a head coach. But I can see a team being like, to hell with that. When he's had a voice and he's had a say, he's enabled quarterbacks to have big years, so let's give him a chance. And then the last one, another position coach, Gerard Mayo. He actually had an interview with the Houston Texans, but familiarity there with Nick Caserio, that totally made sense in my book. But kind of like we talked about Aaron Glenn, D'Amico Ryans, and Ryans and Mayo, both former linebackers. So that presence, that leadership ability, I totally see it on display. And Gerard Mayo might be calling some plays this year, depending on what Bill Belichick's doing. Reports out of camp have been Matt Patricia's calling the offensive plays, but I could see Belichick, especially if things get out to a tough start, taking over on that side. And if he's more focused on the play calling offensive end, don't know if he has the full ability to be the play caller on the defensive side. That's something we don't really see. I've never seen it in my lifetime, at least. I can see Gerard Mayo being the guy he points to, like, hey, I have to focus, Bill Belichick. I got to focus on offense. You got to do the defense now. Bad Bill Belichick impression. But point aside, he might have a bigger role than just linebacker coach this upcoming year. So that's also a position that, the Patriots covet and fully desire. It's more so the leadership aspect, former player, the ability to relate with those guys in the locker room. And you work under Bill Belichick. That's always something that teams are interested to hear in an interview, right? So that part alone almost feels like it gets you into the building. So once you're in the building, anything can happen there. But that's going to do it for my 15 potential future head coaching candidates. Tell me what you think about my list down below in the comment section. Who did I leave off that you think I should have added? And which of these names are you most interested by? And also, what are some potential head coaching openings you think might come available next offseason? Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed today's video and didn't mind my tangents too much, please hit that like button and help me out a ton. And if you're new around here and want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.